4 years at the clinical trials office. I'd give you a little bit more of my background, but it's too long. Today, we're going to be talking about unanticipated problems involving risks to subjects or others, so UPIRSOs. And I'll give you a little overview of what we will be looking at. So first, we're going to talk about the regulatory requirements by both the FDA and the Office of Human Research Protections.
Okay, that's okay.
We're going to define UPIRSOs, adverse events, and what unexpected is per the OHRP. We're going to clarify the difference between UPIRSOs and AE. We're going to talk about the reporting requirements as they are specific to the MCW IRB, and it is slightly different than the FDA and OHRP requirements in that it is sooner. So we will get to that, and then we'll have Q&A both for you guys, from you guys, and then I will have some questions for you guys too. So regulatory requirements. The number one statute that we look at is from the FDA, from 45 CFR 46 and 21 CFR 56. If you are a clinical research coordinator and you're planning on becoming certified, you will have to know this in and out, but you should also know it because it is very important in keeping things under control and so that you don't get audited and are not allowed to do research ever again. So these statutes both require that institutions establish written procedures for ensuring prompt, and prompt is italicized here because that is very important, and we'll talk about those timelines shortly. For reporting these events to the IRB, to the appropriate institutional officials, and the federal department or agency head of any unanticipated problems involving risks to subjects or others, so UPIRSOs. The FDA has a separate regulations that require the prompt reporting of adverse events or effects from the investigators to the sponsors and from the sponsor to the FDA, as well as to other clinical investigators using the same test article. So what is the definition of a UPIRSO? The OHRP, which again is the Office of Human Research Protections, defines a UPIRSO as an unanticipated, that's important, unanticipated problems involving risks to human subjects or others that are defined as any incident, experience, or outcome that meets all three of the following criteria. First, unexpected, and that's unexpected in nature, severity, or frequency. And we'll go over that again. Related or possibly related to your trial. And different or greater risk of harm. And different from what? Well, different from what Apple says, what any written document that you may have received from your sponsor, anything that expresses that is different from that or expresses greater risk of harm. That includes, again, your protocol, your investigator brochure, the ICF, anything like that. So we're gonna talk more, expand a little bit on what the OHRP definition of unexpected is. So again, we're saying unexpected in nature, severity, or frequency given the research procedures that are described in the protocol related documents, such as the IRB approved research protocol and informed consent document. An example here, let's say you're doing a blood draw and the patient gets a bruise. Is that expected or unexpected? Well, we're expecting that if you're getting blood drawn, there's a small likelihood that you will get a bruise. So that's not unexpected. So it has to be something that deviates from things that are expected from the what is described in the protocol. Let's look at part B, the characteristics of the subject population being studied. An example of that is, let's say you have a patient or you have a trial regarding portal hypertension in patients with cirrhosis. So you expect, would an adverse event involving, let's say, variceal bleed from their esophagus, would that be expected or unexpected? Well, if this person already had high portal pressure and they already had enlarged varices in their esophagus, then that would not be necessarily unexpected from that patient population, whereas it would be an unexpected event in any other population. So you have to consider your trials and your patients individually. So the FDA definition of unexpected. So again, we're talking about OHRP and FDA. So FDA definition of unexpected is anything that's not been previously identified in nature, severity, or degree of incidence in the investigational plan or application. Let's say you have a new drug and we are not exactly sure how the medication works. And now we have a patient who used to get a UTI once in a blue moon, and now this person is getting a UTI or getting bacterial infections of another form since they have been on the medication, and they're getting it more frequently. So that would fit this definition. Any adverse experience where the specificity or severity of which is not consistent with the current investigational brochure, or if an investigational brochure is not required or available, the specificity or severity of which is not consistent with the risk information described in the general investigational plan elsewhere and the current application or what your IRB has already approved. So that example I just gave kind of goes a little bit into that, but let's say there's a new drug that now your testing has been used and has been approved, and now you're testing it in combination with a different drug. And now that's causing bradycardia, so very slow heart rate in this study population. So that was not described, right? That's not something that was expected. And we didn't know about that because these two drugs have never been combined. So those are things that are important to keep in mind and to report. We're going to talk about serious adverse events. So all serious adverse events are AEs, but not all AEs are serious adverse events. And I have a Venn diagram ahead, and we'll talk about that to kind of parse that out a little bit. But what is a serious adverse event? It's any adverse event that's temporally associated with the subject's participation in research that meets any of the following criteria. And let me clarify, temporally means as soon as the patient signs consent and you have started study procedures, anything that happens to that patient that meets the criteria of an adverse event, as we have discussed, you have to look into it and decide if it's reportable or not reportable. And we'll talk about the time that you have to do that on the upcoming slides. But a serious adverse event, it's one that results in death. It's life-threatening, meaning it places the subject at immediate risk of death from the event as it occurred. Requires inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization. Results in a persistent or significant disability or incapacity. Results in a congenital anomaly or birth defect. A good example of this, when they started using thalidomide for pregnant women to kind of curb nausea, that medication ended up causing limb defects for children, where now they were being born without legs and arms or neither. So that, for example, would be a serious adverse event. May require medical or surgical intervention to prevent one of the other outcomes listed in this definition above.
Can we just clarify before you go too far? You said that not all are reportable, but I thought that all SAEs were reportable.
Yes,
Okay.
so all SAEs should be are reportable. Not all AEs are reportable, and I am going into that in the next slide. So if you have an adverse event that is not an unanticipated problem. This is not per the 45 CFR Part 46. This Part A does not need to be reported to the FDA. However, if you have an adverse event that is an unanticipated problem, then that needs to be reported, and also unanticipated problems that are not adverse events. So anything that's unanticipated, just keep in mind you have to report that. Because, for example, let's say the patient has an adverse event that is not unanticipated. Let's say I had a patient who was getting their blood drawn, and they had a moment where they felt lightheaded and were having a vasovagal response. That is not unanticipated, but that is an adverse event, for example. So again, I'm going to go over the majority of the adverse events that we get in human subjects are not unanticipated. That's what we keep on the AE log, and we report that at the time of CPR. And then a small portion of adverse events are unanticipated problems. And some of the unanticipated problems include other incidents, experiences, and outcomes that are not adverse events. So I'll give you guys some examples of things that need to be reported. Let's say there's an investigator conducting a behavioral research trial, and he collects individually identifiable sensitive information about illicit drug use and other illegal behaviors by surveying college students. Data is stored on his laptop computer without encryption, and this is his personal laptop, and he's put the laptop in his car, and now the laptop computer has been stolen. So is this unexpected? And anybody can answer.
Yeah.
Yes, so it is unexpected. And then because you didn't anticipate the theft, obviously, is this related to the research or in any way?
Yeah.
That's correct. And does it place the subject at a higher risk by participating in this trial?
Yes.
Yes, so it places them at greater risk of psychological and social harm from the breach in confidentiality from the study data that had been previously recorded. Another example, let's say we have a pharmacy and you order your drug, and the pharmacy tech ended up dispensing because either they saw it incorrectly or because it was ordered incorrectly. They're dispensing 10 times the amount of the investigational drug that is dictated by the protocol. So while this increases the risk of any toxic manifestation of the investigational drug, nothing happened to the subject. They were fine. They felt nothing different. So, is this an unanticipated problem?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct. And it must be obviously reported to the IRB. Was it related to the participation in the research?
Yes.
Yes, because the patient received 10 times the drug, and did it place a subject at higher risk? Yep. And one of the things to consider is people don't process drugs in their livers the same way. Some of us have cytochromes that work harder and some that are very lazy. And so some people have a harder time getting rid of that drug. So that may have caused, if it was warfarin, let's say, that person may have bled internally because they received 10 times the safe dose of that medication.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. Let's see this next case. So subjects with cancer enrolled in a phase 2 clinical trial evaluating an investigational biologic product derived from human serum. After several subjects are enrolled and receive the investigational product, study audit reveals that the investigational product administered to subjects was obtained from donors who were not appropriately screened and tested for several potential viral contaminants, including HIV and Hep B. Is this unanticipated?
Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully.
And it is, yes, it is unexpected. Is it related to the participation in the trial?
Yes.
Correct. and it placed the subjects at greater risk of harm, as they could have acquired any of these infections. What are some of the things that may be corrective actions that the IRB or the sponsor or the FDA or the OHRP may take to fix some of these problems once reported? And I'll let somebody from the people at home answer. Could you repeat the question for them? The question is, what are some corrective actions? Because we report for a reason, right? If we're placing subjects at greater risk, we need to correct that so that in the general sense, we're not putting our patients in danger, which is #1 premium plus priority. So if nobody from the people at home volunteers, will tell somebody.
You can feel free to unmute yourself if you like.
I am gonna pick Christina Jacobs. How about Carolyn? Can you guys hear us?
I knew you were going to do that. I'll be honest. I've been fighting with daycares. Can you repeat the
You're
question?
our
I'll give it a
superstar.
stab.
I love you, Carolyn. But what could be one of the corrective actions?
Sorry. I repeat whatever you want me to answer. Like, what's the scenario?
So when we have identified this reportable events that are placing the subject are unexpected, placing the subject at greater risk, and related to the study, what are things that we can do to kind of correct those things?
I would imagine it depends on what went wrong, and then you could go back and track the issue and try to create a new procedure around it.
Yeah, that exactly that, and that's the #1 thing that can be done is you would, well, first, if it's something serious, you would stop the enrollment of subjects. And then the next possibility is changing the research protocol initiated by the investigator or the sponsor to obtain a new IRB approval to eliminate these hazards to the subjects, either maybe reducing the dose of the medication or anything that may have caused direct hazard to the subject. So for example, the case with the laptop, well, you should have an encrypted laptop. You shouldn't be taking patient's data home. If you are taking it home, it should be in a laptop that's encrypted and that can only be accessed by you, and that your institution has some oversight of. You can modify the inclusion and exclusion criteria to mitigate those newly identified risks. Oh, and yeah, go ahead, whoever's in the
We
chat.
have in the chat, update ICF.
Yes, you definitely need to update the ICF, exactly.
Retraining staff is needed.
Retraining staff, correct. So for example, for that technician who dispensed 10 times the amount of investigational drug, you definitely want to do some retraining unless you want them to murder somebody. Implementation of additional procedures for monitoring subjects. Suspension of research procedures in the patients who are currently enrolled. Like somebody said, modification of the informed consent, and very important to include a new description of what these new hazards are so that people truly have informed consent. And sometimes we can add a provision of additional information about newly recognized risks to previously enrolled subjects. So you should reconsent once you have that approved. So how do you determine what's an adverse event and whatnot, and when to report? So this is a cool algorithm I found on the FDA's webpage. And it's very useful to just have to print it out and keep in your office. To kind of be able to tell when do you need to report. So like we've talked about before, is it unexpected in nature, severity, or frequency? If no, you stop right there. If yes, you move on to the next question. Is it related or possibly related to your participation in research? Yes or no? If no, if it doesn't meet all three, essentially, you do not have to report. Or three, does the advertisement suggest that the research places subjects or others at a greater risk of physical or psychological harm that was previously known or recognized? Here it's important to note, most of the time we think of adverse events as something physical happening. This is very tied to our social stigma of not recognizing psychological damage, as well as much as the physical damage that, let's say, a breach in confidentiality may have on a patient. So remember to keep those in mind. Something that may cause the patient higher anxiety because now they may or may not have HIV. And now we'll talk about timelines. OHRP guidelines for prompt reporting. And when this first came out, by the way, it just said prompt reporting, and there was no definition of what prompt should be, but now we have these guidelines. So guidelines for prompt reporting, unanticipated problems, there is serious adverse events. So SAEs need to be reported to the IRB within 1 week. However, you should report it as soon as possible. You have up to a week. You want to report it the sooner the better. First, you want to talk to your PI and start any procedure that needs to be started to let the sponsor know as well, because they'll have a medical personnel look at it too. And your PI should be first because they have to determine whether it's expected, unexpected, and its relatedness. Any other unanticipated problem should be reported to the IRB within 2 weeks. You still want to do this as soon as possible. However, you have up to 2 weeks from the time the investigator becomes aware of the problem to report it. All unanticipated problems, anything that's unanticipated. So remember that Venn diagram where we had all the unanticipated problems or problems that were anticipated. So anything that was in that diagram, that's B and C, anything unanticipated needs to be reported to the appropriate institutional officials as required by the institution's written reporting procedures. So we're going to go over MCW specific written reporting request and requirement. The supporting agency head or designee in OHRP within 1 month of the IRB's receipt of the report of the problem from the investigator. We'll talk about MCW reporting criteria. Here, so we said, we talked about 1 week, 2 weeks, 30 days. Here, we are required to report these events no later than 5 calendar days. And this is also to protect us because you don't want to just meet the deadline to report. You want to be able to fix anything that needs to be fixed, get a new set of eyes on it. So we're a little bit more strict than actually even the FDA and the OHRP, which is a good thing. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way when you're full of things to do and you have a patient coming in and now you have to do this reportable event, but it is important to get it done within that timeline. It is to protect us as an institution, to protect you as a coordinator, to protect the investigator as well. So, any of the following need to be reported within that timeline. Any adverse events, internal or external. Follow-up reports to initially reported adverse events. Unanticipated problems or any incident, experience, or outcome. Any safety notice or report from the sponsor or central site if the report describes new information regarding risks or unanticipated problems involving risks. Any DSMB or report or equivalent if the report describes new information regarding risks or unanticipated problems involving risks. The MCW HRPP website is really good at keeping all the SOPs for reporting. You'll go in there, you'll go under investigators, and then you'll find all the SOPs, and there's a very long document here where you can find all the information of what needs to be reported and the timelines when things need to be reported. So there's more here. Any external audit reports with which identify activities that increases risk to subjects or others, or compromises the integrity of the research, or is out of compliance with MCW HRPP policies or procedures. Again, you can find those all on their website. Any internal routine review or audit reports, so the QA/QIs that either your department does or the institution does to any of your studies, which identifies activities that increases risks to subjects or others, compromises the integrity of the research, or is out of compliance. A significant protocol deviation or any planned protocol deviations which may increase the risk of participants or others, decreases the potential risk of the project, or undermines the scientific integrity of the project. When you have a planned protocol deviation, you want to do this with plenty of time. If you know that in a month you're going to have significant protocol deviation that may increase the risk to subjects in your trial, and you can get that submitted a month before, just do it as soon as possible. Because it'll take time for the IRB to review it and acknowledge it. And you want to prevent rather than to lament. And anything that is non-compliance with IRB policies or procedures, any of these may cause your study to be put on pause. If you fail to report any of these, you may be banned either by MCW, by the FDA, or OHRP from ever doing research again. So that's a big, big, big thing. I'm leaving you here with some resources and things that you can, webpage that you can go on to find a lot of this information that I shared and to clarify anything that you may need clarification on. I have a very short little quiz here for everybody. So I'm going to ask you to see.
You need them to click on that link. You could always send it to me and I could.
Oh, I will show on screen what I need them to do. I just need to go into presentation mode, which I did earlier, but now I don't remember. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm gonna share this screen now. On. Hold on, I'm gonna go back because this is at the end of the quiz. This is taking forever to open. I apologize. Here we go. Now I just share. And I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to join. Okay, we'll get started. So the first question is, a research subject enrolled in a clinical trial is involved in a car accident and suffers significant physical injuries. The event occurs while the drug administration phase of the protocol is still ongoing. The investigator should report the event to sponsor in the IRB, not report the event to the regulatory agency, report the event to the OHRP. There's still people voting. Ooh, we almost got everybody. Okay, we'll move on from this one. Good job. So 77% of you got it correct. So not reporting the event is not an option, because what if, I mean, here we don't know what the drug is. What if the drug is having a sedative effect and now that's what caused the car accident? So that is unexpected. It places the subject at greater risks. I'm sure an accident is not in the protocol, and neither is the nature of this. So we have to report it. We report first to the sponsor and the IRB. The sponsor is required to report that to the regulatory agencies. So to report to the FDA and the OHRP, they have 30 days to do that. We'll move on to the next question. The sponsor must report a serious adverse event in an IND, new investigational drug. Safe to report to the regulatory agency if the event is serious regardless of anticipatedness or proof of relatedness, serious, unanticipated, and possibly related to the drug. It's mentioned as a high-risk event in the investigator's brochure, or it's stated in the informed consent. Go ahead and vote. Okay, we'll move on. Ooh. Okay, so remember that not all AEs are SAEs, but if it's a serious adverse event, it's definitely an AE. So it has to be serious, unanticipated, related, or possibly related. And that determination is really important. If, let's say, like I mentioned earlier, the example with the patient that has portal hypertension. Well, a variceal bleed for that patient is serious. It will likely require them to have an intervention to ban those varices in the esophagus. It will likely require some hospitalization to make sure that the patient is stable. But is it unanticipated? It is not. A patient who has portal hypertension, who already has had, let's say, a variceal bleed before, that's not unanticipated. Again, you have to consider the population that you're looking at. So remember that it has to be serious, unanticipated, and related or possibly related to the intervention. It doesn't have to be a drug. It could be also a device or whatever the intervention for your study is. So I hope that clarified a little bit. For an adverse event to be characterized as unexpected, OHRP guidance advises that the event should, in nature, severity, or frequency, be not listed in the protocol, not listed in the informed consent, not a characteristic of the study population, or all options are correct. Give you guys a couple more seconds, get your votes in. Okay, we'll move on. That's correct. 86% of you got it right. Good job. So if anything is listed in the protocol or listed in the informed consent, and the informed consent is based on the protocol, then that would be expected, correct? If we have a medication that we know causes bradycardia, then that's not going to be unanticipated. If it's not a characteristic of the study subject population, that's also correct. Because remember, you have to consider each population. I keep going back to that portal hypertension example that I get. So let's say this patient who has portal hypertension, a characteristic of that, let's say it's their variceal bleed. Something that would not be characteristic of that population would be, well, now this person is getting an aneurysm. Well, that's not characteristic of this study population, right? So then that's now something that is considered an adverse event because it's not expected in this population. So again, all options are correct. Good job. Next one. Okay, pharmacist again. Pharmacist makes a dosing error in a clinical trial that results in no harm to any subject. The event is an adverse event that does not represent an unanticipated problem and does not need to be reported under the Department of Health. An adverse event that does not represent an unanticipated problem that needs to be reported under Department of Health regulations. An unanticipated problem that does not involve an adverse event and needs to be reported to the IRB under regulations, or the HHS regulations do not apply. And it's correct, yay. So right here, this is kind of like a trick question. The OHRP operates under the Department of Health. In fact, one of the ways of getting to the OHRP website is the DHHS. So if you go to DHHS and you type in human research, you will find the webpage within that of the OHRP. Let's see. So this is an unanticipated problem, right? But it does not involve an adverse event because no patient was affected. Let's say they realized their error before they were able to distribute any of that drug. They realized it, but it's something that we still need to consider, right? Because what if it happens in the future when we have a patient there, for example? So that needs to be reported to the IRB under the IRB regulations, but because it wasn't distributed to a patient, then it does not involve an adverse event. According to the OHRP guidance, non-anticipated problems which are other than serious should be reported to the IRB within 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks. Oh, it's 2 weeks. Remember that for serious adverse events, you have 1 week per OHRP. For MCW, you have 5 days.
That's what I was thinking, the 5 days, which is 1 week.
Well, so that's for serious adverse events. Per the OHRP, so this is a little bit of a tricky question. I'll go back to that slide. Give me 1 second. I gotta go back to that. Here we go. Let's share this. So if it's a serious adverse event, it should be reported to the IRB within 1 week. Any other unanticipated problem should be reported to the IRB within 2 weeks. But again, you want to do it as soon as possible. So again, institutional and regulatory agencies have different criteria, which is why, let's say you are not working on MCW, that's one of the first things you should become familiar with at your new institution, although you're never going to leave MCW. Okay, last one. In a clinical trial, a serious adverse event should be reported by the investigator within, well, I just showed you the answer. Yay! Whoever picked at some point, I love it. Yes, 7 days. That is correct. At MCW, it's 5 days. Remember that. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Can we have your slides?
You got it, yep.
Well,
You should have everyone should have the box link just in the communications that you get in the reminders, and you'll get another communication with the course evaluation again and the box link again. If for some reason you don't, let me know, and it's gonna be the same box link, and we'll have this presentation and then past sessions all in there as well.
make sure to use the resources that I put on there. There's a lot of examples there. There's also more extensive explanations of everything. Because I know this can be confusing.
You know, I would just like to point out too, that some sponsors require that you report any SAEs to them within 24 hours.
Correct,
When that happens, you might not have all of the information.
correct.
Put down what you know and send it to them. You can always add information later. I mean, they might be admitted for altered mental status. And so that's what you tell the sponsor. However, later it's found out that they are that way because they had, you know, some type of infection or whatever. But when it's 24 hours, put down what you know.
Yeah, and that's all you can do, right? Like you don't have to know everything, but yes, a large majority of sponsors require you to report to them within 24 hours. So that's why I'm saying as soon as possible is best. There's something that Shar brought up earlier before we started this, and it's ConMeds in the setting of having an adverse event. When you're reporting it to, let's say the investigator, and you're putting, you have an EDC where you have to fill out something about an adverse event. Sorry, you want to give your example that you gave, or I can?
Yeah, for example, when you are gathering your ConMed information, which most studies do require, there are some medications that the subject will be on when they come into the study, which we refer to as, you know, medical history.
Right.
You know, for example, they have, you know, high blood pressure, a history of high blood pressure, they're on amlodipine. However, once they're involved in the study, perhaps they get a, you know, an infection, ear infection. And so you're going to capture that as your AE. And then the ConMed, perhaps, you know, penicillin or amoxicillin. You want to make sure that if you have a ConMed that's in there after the patient is on the study, that it relates to either an AE or some type of change in their medical history.
Correct.
Right.
Any other questions, anybody?
When you first started, you were talking about being certified in like the CRP, I think it's initial.
There's two institutions that certified you and being a clinical research coordinator. One is the ACRP and the other one is SOCRA.
Does MCW do like any kind of study or like help with those tests?
In what sense? I am happy to help.
Fairly long, they're huge tests from what I've been told.
They are. I don't know that MCW itself has it. However, the institutions that, you know, give the test, they sometimes will have training sessions beforehand.
They cost a lot of money.
They do, and this is where you talk to your department head and see if they will pay for that.
I got 2 books that I reviewed, and there's a lot of questions and answers, and that's how I studied for it. It's unfortunate that we don't have a prep class here. That would be great.
The CTSI want to put one of those on? Sorry.
I love it.
These kind of
Put it on the list.
these kind of trainings are really important for that stuff, being able to go back and clarifying all these things, because this will definitely be on that exam, and it will be on there heavily. Especially anything that puts a patient at risk will be on there heavily. So I want to say about half of my exam was this. And it would be awesome if we could have any extra help, but feel free to reach out to me, lnunes@mcw.edu.
Do you spell that L?
LNUNEZ, and feel free to send my email out with when we send the slides. I am very happy to help and give you tips and tricks for passing.
I will be contacting you.
Oh yeah, of course.
Our department pays for the test, but they won't pay for the training, so.
Yeah, no, and our department as well, but you can do it. I believe in you.
If you Google the ACRP test, you can find like certain note cards or whatever that are available for free online and stuff too.
Some people make their own and then like Quizlet, and then you can go
Yep.
over those. I can lend you my books, whatever you need.
Thank you.
I also know that the CCRP, so the SOCRA one, if you go on their website, it gives you an entire breakdown of what like exactly you should be studying.
Yeah.
And everything, like how much percentages of the test it is, and that's for free online in a PDF, so.
That is correct. On the ACRP or SOCRA website, that they'll give you like this much is for this regulatory thing, this much is for this other thing. There's actually a SOCRA class put together by the Cancer Center. I don't know how much you had to pay for that. It was recently, so they may be considering doing a class. I am not sure how long it was either, but there's a lot
This
of
is-
resources on YouTube as well.
This is Nedra from the Cancer Center. The class that they sponsored was the SOCR class, so it was the one that's paid for, that you have to pay for the review, but it was the day before the exam. They do that
But
every
it's
couple of
nice to
years.
have it here on site for people who
Yeah.
want to do that. Mhm.
So basically, they're just hosting the event.
Yep.
So.
Right, guys. Thank you, everybody. I hope this helped.
Thank you.